Welcome back to today's video. Before getting to today's video, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below and like the video. And so we're looking at this prediction for Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump with JD Vance and Tim Walz as their respective running mates. Taking a look at the RCP Electoral College map at exactly what they're saying for the individual swing states. So taking a look at this, let's go ahead and start with the state of Wisconsin. The state of Wisconsin, Kamala Harris is currently beating Donald Trump by 1.0% based on an aggregate of about 8 polls. You can see that on the most recent poll, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris tied with 47% and 47% respectively, although in a previous poll, Kamala Harris was up by 4%. That being said, I do believe that Donald Trump will still win the state of Wisconsin due to the fact that Wisconsin is a state which typically does tend to overestimate Democrats. If we go back to the 2020 election cycle in the state of Wisconsin, we can see that Biden was leading in the polling aggregate by 6.7% by the time election day was coming around, and he only ended up leading by 0.7%. We can also see that back in 2016, we can see that Hillary Clinton was leading Donald Trump by 6.5% by the time election day occurred. That being said, you can see that Donald Trump actually ended up winning that state by 0.7%. So we can see that over the last two elections, that Donald Trump has consistently overperformed the polling data in the state of Wisconsin. That being said, when Joe Biden was a nominee, we could see that Trump was beating Joe Biden by approximately 3%. Moving on from the state of Wisconsin, let's take a look at the state of Nevada. The state of Nevada is a crucial, critical battleground state, and we can see that Donald Trump, based off of an aggregate of 4 polls, is beating Kamala Harris by 1.3%. The latest New York Times / Siena poll shows Donald Trump leading Kamala Harris by 1%. Trafalgar poll showed Donald Trump leading by 3%. The Cook Political Report showed Donald Trump leading by 3%. That being said, I would be very critical of Nevada polling since it does tend to overestimate Republicans sometimes. You can go back to the 2016 election and you can see that Hillary Clinton was underestimated in the state of Nevada. If you go back to around 2020, you can see that the polling data was right on spot on. That being said, a 1.3% lead for Donald Trump is not necessarily going to be enough to bring it home. I think that Donald Trump really needs at least a 2 to 3 point lead in order to have at least a 3 point lead in order to have a good cushion ground in the state of Nevada. Moving on from the state of Nevada to the state of Wisconsin, we can see that, we already looked at the state of Wisconsin. Let's take a look at the state of Arizona. In the state of Arizona, Donald Trump is currently leading by 0.2%. We can see in the recent Rumsum poll, we can see that Donald Trump is leading by 2%. Obviously, Rumsum is a poll which, generally speaking, does tend to give Donald Trump higher ratings than other polls. And the New York Times Siena poll prior to that showed Harris actually leading by 5%. So that was a very interesting prediction there when it showed Kamala Harris ahead by 5%. Trafalgar Group, again, showing Donald Trump ahead by 1%. Cook Political Report showing Kamala Harris ahead by 2%. Bloomberg Morning Consult is kind of the opposite of Rumsum reports, I believe. Bloomberg Morning Consult does tend to overestimate Democrats. I don't know if you could say they overestimate Democrats, but when you compare them to most polls, they do tend to, show an outlier in the most of the polls. It does tend to show Democrats ahead by larger margins than other polls. That being said, the Rumsum report also is an outlier when it comes to majority of other polls. It also shows Donald Trump ahead by 2%. The Hill Emerson poll that was taken, I believe, about a month ago, that's pretty irrelevant at this point, but it showed Donald Trump ahead by 5%. But a very close race here, nevertheless, in these particular swing states. We can see that this race is really going to come down to the wire as far as who's going to win this election. In the state of Michigan, we can see Kamala Harris currently ahead by 2%. The recent Rumsum Reports poll does show Kamala Harris ahead by 1%, so that is very interesting. Normally, Rumsum does tend to show Donald Trump leading. That being said, it does seem to show Kamala Harris leading, so that should be some pretty bad news for Donald Trump. We can see that a variety of polls here do tend to show the vice president in a good position here to potentially win here in the state of Michigan. That being said, again, if you go back to 2020, you can see that Biden was leading by around 4.2% by the time the election day was coming around, and he only ended up winning by 2.8%. You can even go back to Hillary Clinton in 2016. You can see that she was leading by 3.6%, and Donald Trump ended up leading by 0.2% when the actual election took place. So about a 2 to 3 point margin of error there in favor of the Democrats historically when it comes to the state of Michigan. And that really explains why Donald Trump is still in play in a lot of these battleground states and why I still think that Donald Trump has a good shot of winning in these states due to the fact that they have historically underestimated him in a lot of these polls when it came down to the actual election. In the state of Pennsylvania, currently Donald Trump is ahead by a slim 0.1%, but that is a lead nevertheless. A very close election here in the state of Pennsylvania. You can see the last two polls do show Donald Trump leading by 1%. Some previous polls did show Kamala Harris leading by a surprising 3 to 4%. That being said, it does seem to possibly have cooled off. An Emerson poll does seem to show Donald Trump ahead by 1%, but a very small lead for the former president. The state of North Carolina, we can currently see that Donald Trump is leading by 1.2%, which is not a good margin whatsoever for him. If you take a look at the last New York Times Siena poll, Donald Trump is behind of Kamala Harris by 2%. And that is not good news whatsoever for him. That being said, he is still in the lead, and that's just what it is at this particular point. In the state of Georgia, we can see that Donald Trump is currently ahead by 1%. You did see some surprising news with Kamala Harris ahead in one of the polls taken by Real Clear Politics. That being said, Donald Trump does seem to have a 4-point lead in one of the most recent polls. So that is with regard to some of the particular swing states. What I want to do at this particular point is go ahead and take a look at the general RCP Electoral College map and take a look at some other states that may have been competitive when Biden was the nominee. That being said, based off of some recent polling data, they might not be that competitive at this point, and they do see some clear signs for a Kamala Harris victory. Specifically, the state of Minnesota, we were projecting previously that Biden would lose this state. That being said, when we're taking a look at the polling data now, you can see Kamala Harris with a clear 8-point lead, a good 8-point lead there. She's polling a 50% or above, which is very good for Kamala Harris. And it does really seem to show that the state of Minnesota is out of play for the Republicans if the polling data does end up happening as it is, which I doubt that the polling data has that big of a margin of error as to give it to the former president. In the state of Virginia, we can see that Kamala Harris is led by 5%. Again, that's a very good lead. She's almost at 50% in the polls. A very good lead for her in the state of Virginia. Another state which some people may have considered Joe Biden might end up losing, but Kamala Harris is going to probably end up winning, is the state of New Mexico. Joe Biden was already ahead by around 7 to 8 percentage points, and Kamala Harris is probably going to be ahead by even bigger margins there in the state of New Mexico. Another state possibly that people may have been thinking of is the state of New Hampshire. Currently, Kamala Harris is led by 5.7%, which is a huge margin for her in the state of New Hampshire, and really explains why the Democrats switched out Kamala Harris. So those are some states that are no longer possibly in play for the 2024 election. Moving on from that, let's take a look at our RCP Electoral College map and kind of fill out this electoral map. And what I'm going to be going ahead and doing is I'm going to be filling out the states that are going to vote for the candidate by under greater than 2% as being safe or likely for those candidates. I'm just going to be filling out all the states that are going to vote basically above 2% for either of the candidates as being safe. And then I'm going to go ahead and fill out all the other states. All right. So we're going to go ahead and fill out all the other states here. And let's go ahead and put Oregon as being a likely state for Kamala Harris to win. A safe state. We're going to put Oregon and Washington as being safe states. Just so that you guys know, anything above 10% is safe. Anything from 5.5% to 9.9% is likely. Anything from 2.1% to 2% to 4.9% would be lean. And anything 2% or below, 2% or below would be in the tilt column. Moving on to the state of Colorado, we are going to go ahead and give that state to Kamala Harris in the safe margin. The state of New Mexico will vote for Kamala Harris in the safe margin as well. The state of Illinois, I'm going to go ahead and put it as being in the safe margin. Let's go ahead and put the state of South Carolina as being in the safe margin. The state of Missouri, safe. Indiana, safe. As well as the state of Iowa, I'm going to go ahead and put that as being safe as well. Let's go ahead and move on to several of these New England states. The state of Vermont, Connecticut, Delaware, Maryland, D.C., Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and New Jersey there being safe. The state of Ohio, I'm going to go ahead and put that state as being likely there for the former president. The state of Texas also going in the likely column. The state of Florida as well going in the likely column. under 10%, but that being said, it is going to be greater than 5%. The state of Alaska as well. Let's go ahead and fill out the state of Hawaii, voting safe for the vice president and the Minnesota congressman. Let's go ahead and give the state of New York as also being a safe state, as well as the state of Maine. The Maine at large is going to be safe for Kamala Harris. We're going to go ahead actually not safe. We're going to go ahead and put it as being lean, actually being lean there. Maine's second congressional district is going to go ahead and be safe for the Republican. The Maine's first congressional district is going to be safe for the Democrats. Moving on from that, let's take a look at the state of New Hampshire. I'm going to go ahead and put this state as being likely for the Democrats. It's going to be a likely state there. The state of Virginia is also going to be a state that I'm going to put as in the likely column. The state of Minnesota as well in the likely column. The state of Utah in the safe column for the former president. And then we're going to go ahead and fill that out at that particular range there. All right, so we have these particular states filled out as you do see them right on this map. Let's take a look at what exactly the candidates are at this point. You see Kamala Harris and Tim Walz at 225 electoral votes, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance at 219 electoral votes. So already Kamala Harris with a 6-point lead there in terms of the electoral college. Now let's take a look and go back to some of these polls that I just took a look at and base this entirely off of polling data. In the state of Georgia, currently Donald Trump is ahead by 1%, according to the RCP aggregate. So let's go ahead and put this state in the tilt column. Now, it might be surprising to you how easy of a path Donald Trump has to victory if he wins the state of Georgia and Pennsylvania. If Donald Trump wins the state of Georgia, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania, really these three states that are very close here to the East Coast, you have a very easy path for Donald Trump if he wins the state of Georgia, as well as the state of North Carolina, which is, by the way, a very much of a swing state. Based off of some recent polling data, we can see that this state is a swing state. But Donald Trump leading the state of North Carolina in the tilt column as well. So in the tilt column, let's take a look at the state of Arizona. Currently, we can see Donald Trump's ahead by 0.2%, 0.2% for Donald Trump. Moving on from that, let's take a look at the state of Nevada. Currently, Donald Trump is leading by 1.3%. So again, in that tilt margin. That being said, I do think that he needs to have a larger victory in the state of Nevada due to some previous historical trends there that do tend to overestimate Republicans. In the state of Michigan, we can see Kamala Harris ahead by 2%, which is quite a big margin. And I believe that my rule was anything 2% to 5%. I'm going to put in the lean column. 2% to 2% to 2% to 4.9% would be in the lean column in the state of Michigan. So in the lean column there, a good state for Kamala Harris. She really needs to win in this state, as well as in the state of Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. Really focusing on several of these swing states is going to be their key to success. And Donald Trump's focus throughout the next 3 months is also going to be key towards his success, his potential success as well. Donald Trump leading by only 0.1% in the state of Pennsylvania. Let's go ahead and give that state to Donald Trump in the tilt column. Again, this is according to the RCP aggregate. Now the state of Wisconsin, currently Kamala Harris is ahead by 1%. 1% there. Kamala Harris ahead by 1%. That will put that state in the tilt column. That is a very close election map. The state of Nebraska's second congressional district, I will leave as toss-up at this particular point. If you take a look at Nebraska's second congressional district in the RCP 2024 Electoral College map, we can see that Nebraska's second congressional district, we do not actually have almost any polling data in that particular congressional district. Even in the Biden and Trump polling, we don't really have any polling. So I'm not going to make any definitive statement. It is a very close race there in Nebraska's second. I do believe that it is a state that voted for Joe Biden, obviously, by around 6%. That being said, it obviously was there was some redistricting measures that did occur in that particular congressional district, which may cause it to go towards Donald Trump. But we're going to go ahead and leave it as being tossed up at this particular point. And so for this prediction, we see that Donald Trump is at 287 electoral votes. The Kamala Harris and Tim Walz ticket at 250 electoral votes. Either way, guys, this is going to be a close election. This is going to be a very, very close election. And I think that there are some people in the media who are saying Kamala Harris Donald Trump's campaign is over. To say that Donald Trump's campaign is over is frankly just a lie. It is a lie because Donald Trump winning 312 electoral votes at this particular point is not that unlikely. If you take a look at the state of Wisconsin, you can see that it overestimated Biden by approximately 6%. If it does the same thing in 2024, Donald Trump leads in the state of Wisconsin by 5%. Even for instance, in the state of Michigan, Kamala Harris is currently ahead by 2%. If it does the same thing that I did in 2020, So, for instance, in 2020, the state of Michigan overestimated Biden. If you take a look at this, it overestimated Biden by approximately around 2%. Sorry, not 2%. It overestimated Biden by 1.4%. It could be a very close election in the state of Michigan. It could come down to only around 0.6% based off of current polling. So it's a very close election, guys. And anybody who's saying that Donald Trump's campaign is over is frankly lying at this point. Is Kamala Harris surging? Yes, she is surging. But does that mean that Donald Trump's campaign is over? No, because what people have to recognize is Donald Trump had a huge lead over Joe Biden. And yes, Kamala Harris has dug into that lead like I have never seen anybody dig into a lead like this in U.S. history, in modern U.S. history. But this is something that we have to confront, that Kamala Harris, even though she might be rising in the polls, that does not mean that she has like a 70% chance of becoming president. I would say this race is a very close race at this particular moment. I could see Donald Trump winning this race. I could see Kamala Harris potentially winning this race. All Kamala Harris has to do is win the state of Pennsylvania, which currently Donald Trump is ahead in by only 0.1%. If 2020 polling errors do occur, that obviously will give it to Donald Trump by an even larger margin. But it is a very close race. Pennsylvania, a flip in Pennsylvania could easily shift this election to a 269 matchup here. If I just flip this congressional district, it could be very easily close to a 269 if Donald Trump wins Nebraska as second. But this is a very, very close election. And anybody who's telling you that Donald Trump's campaign is over is frankly lying to you. If you base it off of current polling data, even if you neglect the fact that the polling data might be underestimating Donald Trump, if you based off of historical trends, it should be underestimating Donald Trump. Even if you neglect that factor, Donald Trump is still in the lead if you go based off of raw vote tallies. Okay, it's if you just based off of raw vote aggregate averages in a collection of polls, in a full aggregate of polls, you can see that Donald Trump is still beating Kamala Harris. And it's going to come down to the wire, guys. Every vote counts. It's not like the Joe Biden versus Donald Trump. When Joe Biden was the nominee, he was being wiped out by Donald Trump. But now that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are the nominee, I think that this is going to be a much closer election. But if you like this video, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below and like the video. We want to be hitting 500 subscribers relatively soon, and every subscriber definitely helps out. So make sure you hit the subscribe button down below to reach 500 subscribers, and make sure you're following along with whatever is happening here in our electoral map. And I'll see you in the next video.